All right, so you're getting ready for this foster care support worker interview, and you really want to knock it out of the park.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't just about any job, right? It's about showing you're here to make a real difference in these kids' lives. So we're going to dive into some common interview questions today, but we're putting a spin on it. Think of it like your own personal prep session, using insights straight from RoleCatcher's Career Guide to help you craft answers that really hit home.
You know, it's interesting. These interviews, they're about more than just checking off boxes of experience. Interviewers are looking for that genuine passion, that drive to support kids who've been through so much.
Authenticity. That's the key. And speaking of authenticity, I'm curious how you'd recommend tackling this first question from the RoleCatcher Guide. Can you tell us about your previous experience working with children in foster care? Seems pretty straightforward, but how do you make it stand out?
Yeah, it's tempting to just rattle off past jobs or volunteer gigs, but this is your moment to bring those experiences to life. So instead of saying, I volunteered at a summer camp, how about you talk about a specific challenge you faced with the child and how you helped them through it? Maybe a child was having a hard time opening up and you used art to help them express themselves. It's those real moments that show your heart.
Yeah, it's about painting a picture, right? Showing not just what you did, but how much you cared. And speaking of care, building those strong relationships with foster families is so important. The guide brings up this question. How do you approach building relationships with foster families? What are your thoughts on that one?
Collaboration, that's the core of it. It's about recognizing you're stepping into a really sensitive situation. Imagine a foster family is worried about keeping up cultural traditions for a child. Instead of just saying, oh, yeah, I'll be supportive, you could talk about actually taking the time to research those traditions so you can offer helpful resources, maybe even organize a cultural event. That shows you're proactive and sensitive.
That's such a powerful example. It's about going above and beyond, showing you're genuinely willing to learn and adapt. And, sometimes these families are going through a lot themselves. That's where a strong team is crucial. The guide mentions that interviewers often ask, how do you prioritize the needs of the foster child in a team-based environment? Have you seen how that plays out in real life?
It's like walking a tightrope. You have to be a strong advocate for the child, but also respect the expertise of the whole team, social workers, therapists, everyone. Let's say you have a child who's struggling in school. During a team meeting, you could advocate for extra educational assessments while also really listening to what the teacher has to say. It's about working together, making sure everyone feels heard, while always keeping the child's best interests at the center.
It's a team effort, for sure, but with the child's well-being as the guiding principle. And that leads us to a question that can be tricky and where I think RoleCatcher's AI feedback could be super valuable. The guide mentions this one. How do you ensure that the cultural needs of the foster child are met?
That's such an important question, and it takes more than just good intentions. It's about showing a deep understanding of cultural sensitivity and being committed to always learning more.
Right. Because every family is unique.
Absolutely. Imagine you're working with a child from a culture that's different from your own. You could talk about being proactive, researching their cultural practices, dietary needs, even learning a few basic phrases in their language. It's about stepping outside your comfort zone and meeting the child where they are.
That's where I think RoleCatcher's AI feedback can be a game changer, don't you think? Especially for questions like this, where the nuances of language can make all the difference.
Absolutely. You practice your answer, and the AI analyzes it, not just for clarity, but for cultural sensitivity, too. It's like having a personal coach in your pocket, helping you refine what you want to say so it lands authentically.
Okay, so we've talked about building relationships, working in teams, and navigating cultural differences. But let's be real. This job, it's not always easy. Sometimes crises happen. The guide lists. Can you describe your experience with crisis management in a foster care setting as a potential question? How do you think is best to approach that one?
Honesty and staying composed, those are key. You don't have to invent some dramatic story if you haven't faced a huge crisis yourself. Instead, focus on showing you can handle pressure and make good decisions when it matters most. Have you had any crisis intervention training? Have you ever had to de-escalate a tense situation, even in a different context? Share those experiences. Highlight how important it is to follow protocol and use your training.
It's about showing you can handle the pressure, right? And even if you haven't had a major crisis in a foster care setting specifically, you can still talk about how you assess risk, stay calm, and seek support when you need it.
Exactly. It's about having that self-awareness and knowing how to act responsibly even when things get tough.
And often that means advocating for the child, even when it's hard. The guide mentions, can you tell us about a time when you had to advocate for the needs of a foster child? as a common interview question. Feels like a chance to share a really powerful story, don't you think?
Absolutely. This is where your passion gets to shine. Think back to a time when you saw a child's needs weren't being met. Maybe they were struggling in school, feeling isolated, or facing a challenge within their foster family.
It could even be something as simple as wanting to keep up with a hobby they loved from before.
Exactly. Describe the steps you took to fight for them. Did you talk to their teacher? Research extra resources? Did you help facilitate a difficult conversation? Be specific and focus on the good that came from your advocacy.
Because when it comes down to it, that's what this role is all about, isn't it? Making a real difference. And that takes a special kind of person, someone who can provide not just practical support, but emotional support too. Speaking of which, the guide also mentions this question. How do you approach providing emotional support to foster children?
That question gets to the heart of what it means to be a foster care support worker. It's about being a source of stability and safety for these kids who may have experienced trauma, neglect, or instability.
And that requires a lot of empathy and understanding.
Definitely. Talk about being able to build trust, create a safe space for them to express their emotions, and offer encouragement and support without judgment.
Are there any specific techniques or strategies you found helpful in providing that emotional support? Something that might resonate with interviewers and show them you've really thought about this part of the role?
Oh, for sure. Maybe you're skilled at active listening, making sure the child feels truly heard. Or maybe you've seen firsthand how helpful art therapy or play therapy can be in helping children work through their emotions. Sharing those specific approaches can make your answers stronger and show how committed you are to this crucial part of the job.
And it's not just about the words we use, right? Sometimes a warm smile, a comforting hand on the shoulder, or just really being present in that moment can mean the world.
Absolutely. It's about creating that feeling of safety and security, which is so important for these kids.
And as much as we want to create that stability, we can't shy away from the elephant in the room, reunification with birth families. The guide addresses this directly with the question. How do you approach working with birth families to support reunification efforts? It's a delicate balance, wouldn't you say?
It really is. It takes compassion, professionalism, and a deep understanding of just how complicated things can be. It's about recognizing that while the goal is often reunification, a child's safety and well-being have to come first.
So how do you navigate that? What would you tell an interviewer who asks about working with birth families?
I think honesty and empathy are crucial. You could say something like, I believe in approaching every family with an open mind and really trying to understand their unique situation. Then you'd want to emphasize clear communication, active listening, and never judging. It's about working with the family, not against them, to address the issues that led to the child being removed.
It's like being facilitator, right? A bridge between the family, the child, and all the support systems out there.
Precisely. And that often involves connecting families with resources like parenting classes, substance abuse treatment, or mental health services.
And that can be emotionally draining, which brings us to another important question from the guide. How do you prioritize self-care and ensure that you are able to provide quality care to foster children? Because you can't pour from an empty cup, right?
I can't. And interviewers want to see that you understand how important self-care is, not just for you, but for the children you're working with. This is where you get to show how self-aware you are. What are your go-to methods for staying grounded and resilient?
Exactly. Do you meditate regularly? Are you a runner? Do you journal? Sharing those strategies shows you're serious about this.
Exactly. It proves you're committed to bringing your best self to this work, day in and day out.
Now, before we move on, I wanted to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about RoleCatcher's AI feedback feature. Oh, yes. I'm so glad you brought that back up.
Oh.
I think it's especially relevant for this next question from the guide. What are your salary expectations for this role? Talking about money can be so awkward, can't it?
It really can. It can feel like you're walking on eggshells, but RoleCatcher helps you navigate that conversation confidently.
So tell me, how does it actually work?
Okay, so let's say you're practicing your answer to that salary question. You input your desired range, and RoleCatcher's AI analyzes it. It considers things like your experience level, the job market in your area, even the specific organization you're interviewing with. It might suggest tweaking your range or give you tips on how to better explain your worth.
Like having your own personal salary negotiator.
Exactly. No more guessing games. You'll walk into that conversation feeling confident and clear-headed.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. We've talked about building relationships with foster families, navigating cultural differences, advocating for children's needs, and even making sure we're taking care of ourselves. But what about those unexpected questions, the ones that catch you off guard? The guide mentions having a few stories prepared that highlight your skills and experiences.
Yeah, having those stories ready to go can be a lifesaver. Think about times when you really showed your patience, your problem-solving skills, your ability to stay calm in a tough situation.
It's like having a highlight reel of all your best moments ready to share. Those stories can really make your qualifications come to life.
Yeah.
We've covered so much today, from navigating those team dynamics to supporting reunification efforts and even advocating for fair pay. It feels like we've only scratched the surface, but maybe that's part of what makes this field so incredible.
I think so. Working as a foster care support worker, it's more than just a job, it's a calling. It's a journey of constant learning and growth. And RoleCatcher, it's like having that extra support system right there with you, not just for the interview, but for your whole career.
It's like having a mentor in your corner every step of the way. And before we wrap up, any final words of wisdom for our listeners who are about to embark on this amazing journey?
Remember this, every interaction, every challenge, it's a chance to learn and grow. Approach each day with an open heart, a willingness to learn, and that deep commitment to making a difference in the lives of these incredible kids.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And to our listeners, remember, you've got this. The world needs more people like you, compassionate and dedicated. Go out there and make a difference.